didn't notice it the first night. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't think it mattered. It's strange how your brain works. When something small feels wrong, you don't panic right away. You explain it, you ignore it, you convince yourself it's nothing. That's exactly what I did. I was 23, living alone for the first time in a small apartment just outside of Denver. It wasn't big, just a bedroom, a bathroom, and a living room, but it felt like enough. Enough space, enough privacy, enough quiet. I liked the quiet, at least I thought I did. My routine was simple. I worked during the day, came home, made dinner, watched something on my laptop, and went to bed. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would make me feel unsafe. That's why the first time I saw the closet door slightly open, I didn't think twice. I was getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth, when I glanced into my room and noticed it. Just a few inches open. I was sure I had closed it earlier. I always did. I didn't like seeing inside it at night. The dark space between hanging clothes always made me feel a little uneasy for no real reason. But instead of questioning it, I just walked in, pushed it shut, and got into bed. I didn't think about it again. The second night I noticed it earlier. I had just gotten home, dropped my keys on the table, and walked into the bedroom to change. The closet door was open again. Same amount, same angle, just enough to make it noticeable. I stood there for a second, staring at it, trying to remember if I had left it like that in the morning. Maybe I was rushing, maybe I forgot. That made sense. It was a simple explanation. So I closed it again. This time I made sure it clicked. I even tested it, pulling slightly to make sure it stayed shut. It did. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. That night I woke up around 2 a.m. for no reason I could explain. No noise. No dream. Just that sudden, uncomfortable awareness that something wasn't right. I opened my eyes, slowly staring at the ceiling, listening. The apartment was completely silent. Too silent. Then I turned my head slightly toward the corner of the room. The closet door was open. Wider this time, not just a few inches. Enough that I could see the darkness inside clearly. My chest tightened instantly. I sat up slowly, my eyes fixed on the opening. I tried to convince myself I must have opened it without remembering. Sleepwalking maybe. People do that. But something about it didn't feel like that. It felt deliberate. I got out of bed and walked over to it every step, feeling heavier than it should have. The floor creaked slightly under my weight, the sound echoing too loudly in the quiet room. I reached the door and pushed it open the rest of the way. Nothing inside. Just clothes hanging normally, shoes on the floor, everything exactly as I left it. I let out a shaky breath and closed it again. This time I locked it. There was a small latch on the inside of the door. I never used it before, but I slid it into place anyway, just in case. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, checking the door, making sure it stayed closed. It did. Every time I looked, it was still shut, still locked. The next morning, I tried to forget about it. I told myself it was nothing, just a weird coincidence, a habit I didn't realize I had. That explanation worked. For a while, until the fourth night. I stayed up later than usual, watching something on my laptop, trying to distract myself from the lingering unease that hadn't quite gone away. Around midnight, I finally decided to go to bed. I got up, turned off the lights, and did one last check of the room. The closet door was closed, locked. I even touched it just to be sure. It didn't move. I lay down, pulled the blanket over me, and closed my eyes. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I woke up again in the middle of the night. This time it wasn't silence that woke me. It was a sound. Faint, subtle, but unmistakable. Breathing, not mine. Slow, steady, coming from somewhere in the room. My eyes snapped open and I froze instantly. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe properly. I just listened. The sound was there, soft, controlled, close, too close. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. I tried to figure out where it was coming from without moving my head, and then I realized something that made my stomach drop. It was coming from the closet. I forced myself to look, slowly, carefully, and what I saw made every part of my body go cold. The closet door was open again. Not wide, not all the way, just enough. Enough for something inside to be watching me. Enough for that breathing to slip out into the room. I didn't get out of bed this time. I didn't move. I just lay there, staring at the darkness between my clothes, listening to something that shouldn't have been there. And the worst part wasn't the sound. It was the feeling, the certainty that whatever was inside that closet knew I was awake, and it was waiting for me to move. I didn't move. I couldn't. My entire body felt locked in place as I stared at the gap in the closet door, trying to convince myself that what I was hearing wasn't real, that the breathing wasn't real, that it was just my imagination filling the silence with something it expected to hear. But it didn't stop. It stayed steady, slow, controlled, too consistent to be anything random. My chest tightened as I tried to breathe as quietly as possible, terrified that even the smallest sound would give me away. I kept my eyes fixed on the closet, waiting for something to happen, waiting for it to move. It didn't, not at first. Minutes passed, or maybe it was seconds. It felt like time had stretched, slowed down to the point where every heartbeat felt separate from the last. Then, very slowly, the door moved. Just a fraction. The gap widened slightly, barely noticeable unless you were already staring at it like I was. My stomach dropped instantly. Something inside had touched it. Something inside had pushed it. I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek to stop myself from making a sound. The breathing stopped for a second, then resumed. Slightly closer now, slightly louder. I could feel it, not physically, but in that way you feel someone else in the room with you without seeing them. The air felt heavier, thicker, like it had weight. And then I realized something that made everything worse. The latch. I had locked it. I knew I had. I remembered the exact motion, the click, the way I checked it twice before getting into bed. But now, the door was open again, which meant one of two things. Either I hadn't locked it, or something inside had unlocked it from the inside. I felt a wave of nausea hit me, so suddenly I had to swallow it down. My mind started racing, trying to find any explanation that made sense. There had to be one. There always was. Old building, faulty latch, pressure changes, anything. But none of it explained the breathing, none of it explained the movement, and none of it explained the feeling that whatever was inside wasn't just there by accident. It was hiding, waiting, watching. I don't know how long I lay there before I finally did something. It wasn't bravery, it wasn't logic. It was something closer to panic, reaching a breaking point. I slowly reached for my phone on the nightstand, trying to keep my movements as small and quiet as possible. My hand shook so badly I almost knocked it over. I grabbed it and turned the screen on, the faint light illuminating the edge of the room just enough to make things worse. The glow reached the closet, not fully, just enough to outline the opening. And for a split second, I thought I saw something move inside. Not clearly, not a full shape, just a shift, like someone adjusting their position. I froze again, my breath caught halfway in my chest. The light from my phone felt too bright now, too revealing. I quickly dimmed it, terrified that it might expose me completely. The breathing stopped again. Silence filled the room, absolute silence. And then, a voice, so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. "I know you're awake." My entire body went cold. The words weren't loud. They weren't aggressive. They were calm, matter of fact, like it was stating something obvious, something it had already confirmed. I couldn't respond. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think properly. My brain was trying to process what I had just heard, but it didn't fit into anything that made sense. The voice came from the closet, from inside it, from something that had been there the entire time. "Don't move," it said softly. The tone didn't change, still calm, still controlled. That made it worse. If it had sounded angry, I could have reacted. If it had sounded loud, I could have screamed. But it didn't. It sounded patient, like it wasn't in a hurry, like it knew I had nowhere to go. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, then opened them again, forcing myself to look. The door moved again, slowly, wider this time. The darkness inside seemed deeper than it should have been, swallowing the faint light from my phone. And then, I saw it, a hand, pale, thin, slowly reaching out from between the hanging clothes. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it would burst. The fingers curled, slightly gripping the edge of the door as it opened just a little more. I couldn't breathe anymore. I couldn't think. The only thing I could do was stare as the hand tightened its grip and pulled. The door opened further, enough for something behind it to shift forward. I saw the outline of a shoulder, the side of a face. Not fully visible, but enough to know it was real. Enough to know it was there, and it had been there for a long time. The voice came again, slightly closer now. "You shouldn't have closed the door." That was the moment something in me finally snapped. Not courage, not strength, just instinct. I moved, fast. I grabbed my phone and ran, out of the bed, out of the room, into the hallway. I didn't look back, I didn't stop. I just ran straight for the front door, my hands shaking as I struggled with the lock. I could hear movement behind me now, not loud, not chasing, just following, slow, deliberate, like it knew I wouldn't get far. I threw the door open and ran outside the cold air, hitting me like a shock. I didn't stop until I reached the middle of the street. Only then did I turn around. The front door was still open. The hallway behind it dark, empty, or at least it looked empty from where I stood. The police arrived within minutes. I don't remember calling them, but I must have. They searched the entire apartment, every room, every closet. They checked everything. They found nothing, no signs of forced entry, no one hiding, no explanation. But one of the officers did notice something: the closet latch. It was broken, not recently, not from that night. It had been worn down for a long time, loose, easy to open from the inside. I moved out the next day. I didn't go back for most of my things. I didn't want to. I didn't need to. But sometimes when I think about that night, there's one detail that still doesn't make sense. If the latch had been broken the whole time, that means the closet was never really locked, which means whatever was inside didn't get in that night. It was already there, long before I ever noticed the door moving. It started with something so small, I almost didn't notice it. Just a car parked across the street. That's it. No weird sounds, no shadows, no one watching me through the window, just a car. And if I'm being honest, if it had only happened once, I probably would have forgotten about it completely. I was 27, living alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio, the kind of place where people waved when they drove past and left their porch lights on all night. It felt safe, predictable, boring even, which is probably why it took me longer than it should have to realize something was wrong. The first time I saw the car, it was around 11 p.m. I had just gotten home from work, parked in my driveway, and was grabbing my bag from the passenger seat when I noticed it. A dark sedan parked on the opposite side of the street, just far enough from my house that it didn't look out of place. The engine wasn't running. The lights were off. I didn't think much of it. It could have been anyone, a neighbor, a visitor, someone lost. I locked my car and went inside without a second thought. The next night it was there again. Same spot, same angle, same dark silhouette under the streetlight. This time I paused a little longer when I saw it. Not enough to feel scared, just enough to notice. I told myself it probably belonged to someone nearby. Maybe a neighbor had guests over. That made sense. I went inside, locked the door, and moved on with my night. But on the third night, something felt different. I got home a little earlier than usual, around 9:30 p.m. The street was quieter than normal, no cars passing by, no lights in the houses across from mine, and the car was already there, parked in the same exact spot. That was the first time I felt it. Not fear, not yet, just awareness. Like my brain had finally decided this wasn't random anymore. I sat in my car for a few seconds watching it, waiting for some kind of movement, a door opening, a light turning on, anything that would explain it. Nothing happened. The car just sat there, still, silent, watching. I shook my head, grabbed my things, and went inside, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping into my chest. That night, I made sure to lock everything. Doors, windows, even the back door, which I usually didn't worry about as much. I told myself I was being cautious, not paranoid. There's a difference. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Around midnight, I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel louder than it should. I stood by the sink staring out the window without really thinking. And then I saw it. The car, still there. But this time, it wasn't empty. There was someone inside. I couldn't see clearly. The streetlight didn't reach that far, but I could see the outline of a person in the driver's seat, completely still, facing my house. My stomach tightened instantly. I stepped back from the window without thinking, my heart starting to beat faster. Maybe they were just sitting there, on their phone, waiting for someone. That's normal, right? People do that all the time. I forced myself to look again. The silhouette hadn't moved, not even slightly. It was just there, watching. I turned off the kitchen light, immediately plunging the room into darkness. I didn't want them to see me. I didn't want them to know I had noticed. I stood there for a few seconds, my eyes adjusting to the dark, trying to see if they reacted. They didn't. The car stayed still. The figure stayed still. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. because something about it felt wrong, too still, too intentional. I went to bed not long after that, but I didn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that silhouette sitting there facing my house waiting. The next morning, the car was gone, just like that. No sign it had ever been there. I almost laughed at myself while getting ready for work. "You're overthinking it," I said out loud. "It's nothing." That explanation worked for exactly one day, because that night when I got home, it was back. Same spot, same car, same silence. This time I didn't get out of my car right away. I sat there staring at it, my fingers tightening around my keys. I tried to see inside, but the windows were too dark, too tinted. I couldn't tell if anyone was in there or not. I checked the time. 10:58 p.m., almost the exact same time as the night before. That's when I realized something that made my chest tighten. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. Same place, same time, same car, every night. And for the first time, the thought crossed my mind, maybe it wasn't just parked there. Maybe it was waiting for me. That was the first night I didn't feel safe in my own house. Not uneasy, not uncomfortable, unsafe. There's a difference. Uneasy means you can still explain things. Unsafe means you've already stopped trying. I stayed in my car longer than I should have, staring across the street at the dark sedan, trying to decide what to do. I didn't want to go inside, but I also didn't want to sit there like an idiot pretending nothing was wrong. Eventually, I forced myself to get out, lock the door, and walk up to my house without looking back. I could feel it though, that feeling of being watched. You don't need to see it to know it's there. I went inside quickly and locked everything behind me. This time I double-checked the windows too. Not just the obvious ones. All of them. Even the small one in the laundry room I never thought about before. I turned off the lights in the living room and stood near the edge of the hallway, just far enough back that I could see the street without being seen. The car was still there, and this time, I knew someone was inside. I couldn't explain how I knew, I just did. There's a certain stillness people have when they're just sitting. This wasn't that. This felt focused, intentional, like they weren't just there. They were watching something specific. Watching me. I stood there for a long time, barely moving, barely breathing. Minutes passed. Nothing changed. The car didn't move. The figure didn't move. It just stayed there. And then, slowly, the headlights turned on. My heart jumped instantly. The sudden light cut through the darkness, illuminating part of my yard. I froze my body, going completely rigid. The engine didn't start. The car didn't move. The lights just stayed on, pointed directly at my house. My stomach twisted. That wasn't normal. That wasn't someone waiting for a friend or checking directions. That was deliberate. I backed away from the window immediately, my heart racing. I didn't want them to see me. I didn't want them to know where I was in the house. I grabbed my phone and considered calling the police, but I hesitated again. What would I say? There's a car outside with its headlights on. It sounded stupid, even though every part of me knew it wasn't. I decided to wait, just a little longer, see if they left. They didn't. The lights stayed on for almost 10 minutes. Then, just as suddenly as they turned on, they turned off again. The car went back to being a dark shape under the streetlight. Silent, still, watching. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up checking the window every few minutes, making sure the car was still there. Around 3 a.m., it finally left. I didn't see it go. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't, like it had disappeared. The next morning, I called my neighbor, an older woman who had lived on that street for years. I asked her if she had noticed a car parked outside at night. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. "What kind of car?" she asked. I described it. Dark sedan, same spot, same time, every night. Another pause, longer this time. "That car's been there before," she said quietly. "A few weeks ago, parked outside the Johnson house." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" I asked. She hesitated. "They had someone break in," she said. "Middle of the night, no forced entry, like the person already knew the house." I felt my grip tighten on the phone. "Did they catch him?" "No," she said. "He just disappeared." That night, I didn't wait to see if the car would show up. I locked everything early, turned off all the lights, and stayed in my bedroom with the door closed. Around 11 p.m., I heard it, the faint sound of a car pulling up outside. My heart sank instantly. I didn't need to look. I already knew, but I did anyway. Slowly, carefully, I moved toward the window and pulled the curtain back just a fraction. The car was there, same spot, same angle, but this time, Something was different. The driver's side door was open. My breath caught in my throat. The interior light was on, casting a faint glow onto the pavement. But there was no one inside. The seat was empty. My chest tightened so fast it hurt. If the car was empty, then where was he? I let the curtain fall back into place and stepped away slowly, my heart pounding harder than it ever had before. That's when I heard it, a soft sound, not from outside, from inside the house, a floorboard creaking, somewhere behind me. I froze. Every part of my body went cold. The sound came again, closer this time, slow, deliberate, like someone taking careful steps. I turned my head slightly, just enough to look toward the hallway, and for a split second, I saw movement, a shadow shifting just out of sight. My heart stopped. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring, trying to process what was happening. And then I realized something that made everything worse. The car outside wasn't there to watch me. It was there to make sure I stayed inside, because whoever had been sitting in it was already in my house. I knew something was wrong the second I pulled into my driveway. It wasn't obvious at first, nothing dramatic, no broken windows, no alarms, no lights flashing, just a feeling. That quiet, uncomfortable feeling that something wasn't where it was supposed to be. I was 29 at the time, working late shifts at a clinic, and it was already past 11 p.m. when I got home. The street was empty, the houses around me dark. Everything looked normal, but as I sat there in my car for a moment, staring at my house, I felt it, that subtle sense that something had changed. I shook it off, grabbed my bag, and got out. I told myself I was just tired. That's what long shifts do to you. They mess with your head. Make everything feel heavier than it actually is. I walked up to the front door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. The house was quiet, still, exactly how I left it. I locked the door behind me out of habit and dropped my keys on the table. That's when I noticed it. The faint draft, cold air moving through the hallway. My stomach tightened slightly. I didn't have any windows open. I never left them open when I wasn't home. I stood there for a second listening. Nothing, no movement. No sound, just that subtle shift in the air. I told myself it was nothing. Old house, air pressure, something normal, something explainable. I walked into the kitchen and set my bag down on the counter. That's when I saw it, the back door. It was open, not wide, just a few inches, enough for the night air to slip inside. My chest tightened instantly. I knew I had locked that door before leaving. I always did. It was part of my routine. Front door, back door, windows, check everything twice. I was careful. I had to be. I stood there, staring at the gap, trying to convince myself there was a reason. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I was rushing. Maybe I didn't check it properly. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I walked toward it slowly, my heart starting to beat faster. Every step felt louder than it should have. The floor creaked under my weight, echoing in the quiet house. When I reached the door, I pushed it open the rest of the way and looked outside. The yard was empty, dark, still, no movement, no sound. I stepped out slightly, scanning the area, trying to see if anyone was there. Nothing, just silence. I closed the door quickly and locked it, checking the handle twice to make sure it was secure. My hands were shaking now just slightly, enough for me to notice. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning the room. Everything looked normal, nothing out of place. But that feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got stronger. I grabbed my phone and stood there for a moment, debating whether I should call someone, the police, a friend, anyone. But I hesitated. What would I even say? My door was open. It sounded ridiculous. There was no proof anything had happened, no sign of a break-in, no missing items, nothing. I told myself I was overreacting, that I was letting my imagination get the best of me. So I did what I always did when something felt off. I tried to normalize it. I turned on the TV. I turned on more lights. I filled the silence with noise. For a while it worked. The house felt more normal, less empty, less watched. Around midnight, I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Everything was quiet again, but not in a way that felt peaceful. It felt controlled. Like the silence was intentional. I leaned against the counter, staring into the living room, trying to shake the feeling. That's when I noticed something else. My bag. I had left it on the counter when I came in, but now It wasn't where I left it. It had been moved slightly. Not far, just enough that I could tell. My stomach dropped instantly. I walked closer, my eyes fixed on it. The zipper was open now. I knew I had closed it. I always closed it. I reached inside, slowly, my hand trembling. Everything was still there. Wallet, phone charger, keys, nothing missing. But that wasn't the point. Someone had touched it. Someone had been in my house, and they were still here. The realization hit me all at once, like my brain finally stopped trying to protect me from it. I wasn't alone. The air felt heavier, thicker. Every shadow in the room seemed darker than it should have been. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning every corner, every doorway. That's when I heard it, a soft sound, faint, almost unnoticeable. But in that silence, it stood out immediately. A footstep. Not from outside, not from the house settling, from inside, somewhere deeper in the house. I froze. My entire body went rigid. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. Another step, slow, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. I turned my head slowly toward the hallway, leading to the bedrooms. The light didn't reach all the way down. The end of the hall was dark. Too dark. And for a split second, I saw something move. Just a shadow, shifting slightly, then disappearing. I felt my throat tighten. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. I knew what that meant. The door hadn't been left open by accident. It hadn't been a mistake. Someone had come in while I was gone, and they hadn't left. They were still there, in my house, somewhere in the dark, waiting. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I didn't do anything people say you should do in those situations. I just stood there completely still, staring down the hallway like if I didn't move, whatever was there wouldn't notice me. It's strange how your body reacts when fear hits you like that. It doesn't make you faster. It makes you quiet, smaller, like hiding is the only option you have left. The silence stretched for a few seconds, but it felt longer. My ears were ringing from how hard my heart was pounding. Then I heard it again. Another step. Slightly louder this time. Closer. The floor creaked under the weight. Not a light step, not an animal, a person. My brain finally caught up with what was happening and the panic hit all at once. I slowly reached for my phone on the counter, trying not to make any sudden movements. My fingers were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I unlocked it and dialed 911, pressing the phone tightly against my ear as I backed away from the hallway. "There's someone in my house," I whispered. My voice barely came out. The dispatcher asked me to stay calm, to stay hidden, to not confront whoever was inside. Officers were already on the way. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. My eyes never left the hallway. I needed to see where he was. I needed to know how close he was getting. The darkness at the end of the hall felt deeper now, like it was swallowing the light instead of just blocking it. And then, he stepped into view. Slowly, deliberately. A man, tall, wearing dark clothes. His head slightly lowered, like he was watching the floor as he walked. My entire body went cold. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could see enough. Enough to know he wasn't just wandering. He wasn't confused. He knew exactly where he was. And he knew I was there. He stopped in the middle of the hallway. Just stood there. Still, listening. The dispatcher was still talking, asking if I could see him, asking where he was in the house. I whispered, "He's in the hallway." The man lifted his head slowly, and for a moment, I thought he was looking directly at me. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to stay out of sight, trying to make myself invisible. But it didn't matter. I could feel it, that same feeling from earlier. Being watched, being tracked. He took another step forward, then another. Each one, slow, controlled, not rushed, like he had all the time in the world. I backed away further, moving toward the kitchen, my phone still pressed against my ear. "He's coming closer," I whispered. The dispatcher told me to find somewhere to hide, somewhere I could lock myself in, but there wasn't anywhere safe. No room with a lock strong enough, no place to go that he couldn't reach. The house suddenly felt too small, too open, too exposed. I glanced toward the back door for a second, thinking about running, but the moment I looked away from the hallway, I heard it. Faster footsteps. He was moving now, not slowly anymore. I turned back just in time to see him step fully into the light, and this time I saw his face. It wasn't masked, it wasn't hidden, just blank. expressionless, like he wasn't even trying to hide what he was doing, like it didn't matter if I saw him. "Don't move," he said quietly. My entire body locked up instantly. The words were calm, almost gentle, but there was something behind them that made it clear he wasn't asking. He was telling me. I couldn't respond. I couldn't even think. The dispatcher's voice faded into the background. All I could hear was him and my own heartbeat. He took another step closer, then stopped again, just a few feet away now, close enough that I could hear his breathing. Slow, steady, like he wasn't afraid at all, like he was completely in control. And then, sirens. Loud, close, coming fast. The sound cut through the tension instantly. His expression didn't change, but his posture did, slightly, just enough to show he had heard it. He turned his head toward the front of the house listening. The sirens got louder, closer, right outside, and then just like that, he moved. Fast. Not toward me, away. He turned and ran down the hallway, disappearing into the darkness. I didn't chase him. I didn't move. I just stood there, shaking, unable to process what had just happened. Seconds later, the front door burst open. Police. Shouting. Moving through the house quickly. Clearing rooms. Calling out. They searched everything. Every room. Every corner. But they didn't find him. No sign of where he went. No broken windows. No open doors. Nothing that showed how he got in or how he got out. But they did find something else. The back door lock. It had been tampered with. Not forced. Not broken. Just manipulated. Like someone who knew what they were doing had opened it quietly, carefully. One of the officers looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "He didn't come in after you got home," he said. "He was already inside." I didn't stay there another night. I packed what I could the next day and left. I never went back. But sometimes, when I think about that night, there's one detail that still bothers me more than anything else. He didn't run when he saw me. He didn't panic. He didn't hesitate. He just waited. Like he expected me to come home. Like he had been planning it. Like I wasn't the one who walked into the wrong house. He was. And I just happened to arrive too early.